Morning and welcome to Infrastructure Committee. A very warm welcome and thank you to our community board members, Annie Lemons, Jan Finson and Charles Scarsbrooks. I will call for any apologies. Nope. Any matters of an urgent business? No. Any matters of a minor nature? Okay, I'll call for any conflicts of interest. Okay, the Chairman's report. Over the last month, I've attended council workshops on the 7th of March and 21st of April and caught up with Land Transport Manager Andrew Dixon on the 18th of March. I've been involved with budget discussions, attended council annual planning and budget meeting. I've attended the elected members updates over the last 4 weeks and attended the People and Performance Committee on the 7th of April along with the council meeting on the 7th of April. I'm happy to move my report if I can have a seconder. Thank you, Mayor Bowen. All in favour? Thank you. Right. Moving on, we've got the confirmations of the minutes from Tuesday the 2nd of March. Any matters arising from those minutes? Okay, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Gilchrist and second by Councillor O'Reilly. Thank you. Okay, reports. So we have 3 reports to consider this morning. 2 reports are in regard to extending a road seal. If these reports are accepted by the committee, then they will then go through to the annual plan process to be represented. First up is the Spur Road Seal Extension report on page 13. So this is the second time Spur Road has been brought to my attention during my time as a councillor. And I had a resident telephone me about 2 months ago, concerned once again about the gravel part of the road. She tells me that the gravel was a mess, that it's a shambles, that the grading only lasts 2 days and is very busy, and 2 cyclists at that time had just fallen off her bike. So at that time I liaised with Andrew Dixon and Anthony Bacon and asked for a review of this road and to complete a report to come to council. Since then, I've also heard last week that there was a bad accident on the road at the seal where the gravel and the tar seal meet. It was on a bit of a bend and a car rolled. So it's a 1.4 kilometres of unsealed road that they're looking at, and it's used by heavy vehicles from the quarry and farm machinery. The cost of maintenance, the proposed seal does have an increased cost compared to the road maintenance, but we must also look at the public usability and condition and public safety for this road versus the cost of maintenance. So I'll invite Andrew Dixon to speak to the report if he wishes. And also, Andrew, can you identify through the report, it says a frequent grading. I see in the report ahead, Orari has a fortnightly grading with 70 to 110 vehicles. Spur Road has 80 vehicles, so it's quite comparable. If you could include what is the frequency of the grading, I'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll answer the first question. The frequency of the grading is 4 weekly at the moment. That's keeping up with it, and then we're having to put metal down about 3 times a year. So it is reasonably high use road. It's of the 80 vehicles a day that are using it, 13% of them are heavy vehicles, so it is frequent there. I think with Spur Road, there's a lot of lifestyle blocks along that road. And those lifestyle blocks are starting to creep up further up towards Brockley Road onto the unsealed section again. I do acknowledge there is potentially a safety issue there because any driver going from a sealed carriageway where they can go reasonably quickly onto an unsealed carriageway where if they don't slow down they can get themselves into quite a bit of trouble, and I think this was the case of the recent crash. They did not slow down enough and lost control. It is quite common in changing from sealed to unsealed roads, particularly when you've got a lot of, I guess, lifestyle block who are more urban type residents who are not used to driving on unsealed roads. So there would be, in sealing this road, there would be definitely a safety benefit. Seal extensions cost, of course, and yeah, an unsealed road, I will point out, is cheaper to maintain long term, and we've done the economic analysis of that. But there are benefits, as the chair correctly pointed out, particularly around the environment side of things. Dust is the major issue, and the only real mitigation to dust is sealing the road. You can put a lot of other things, temporary things on, but sealing is the best long-term solution. So yeah, not much more I can say, to be honest.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for your report. Councillor Piddington. Oh, you need to unmute yourself.
I'm muting, hang on. We can hear,
Councillor Piddington, you need to unmute.
Try now.
Go ahead.
I need to change the mouse batteries, obviously. Look, I'm concerned on a couple of points. The first is the spending on this. We're trying to keep the fiscal purse closed, and it's 300K, considering what our next one is 1.2 million. I accept that, Andrew, your points, but every gravel road would have the same. And I note in the report it says there's no actual housing on that stretch of road. You can come down Spur Road and go Washdyke Flat Road or up Callans Hill. Where does it sit, Andrew, on these roads? Because your economic analysis doesn't actually say what the difference in cost is to the ratepayer. And if we do this for Spur Road, how many other roads like this have we got in the district they'll line up? But I'm against it because I just think it's wasting 300K of ratepayers' money. For one accident, that isn't good, but as you've said, Andrew, speed's involved there. So we're about to spend 1.2 on Orari Back Road. I just don't think we have endless spending in this current environment.
I think it's important to note that, you know, we, after this lockdown, we're also trying to get the economic side of things, get the district kick-started again. So you could consider that this project is one that is almost shovel-ready to get going, and maybe it could be an economic stimulus to the district.
Look, everything we do will be an economic stimulus. We're about to put the rates up. Orari Back Road, Andrew, wasn't considered, and we're going to spend 1.2 that we weren't going to spend. That's an economic stimulus as well. We can't do it all on our own. And I just think one complaint isn't enough to have a road sealed.
Thank you, Councillor Piddington. I must say it's not been one complaint, it's been several over my last 4 years as a councillor. Andrew, if we increase the frequency of grading to fortnightly, like the Orari Back Road, how would that pan out? Would that be a benefit to the road, and what would the financial implications be?
There could be a benefit to the road. You certainly get a smoother surface if you increase the frequency to fortnightly. One of the issues you have, of course, when you're grading roads very frequently, is you're actually grading the metal off the top, and therefore you have to replace that more frequently as a flip side. That can be done. Grading in metal is very cheap at the moment. We get a lot of our metal from the rivers, crush it up, it's pretty low cost. And likewise with our current maintenance contract and the way it was tendered, the grading itself is extremely cheap as well. We're talking about, grading side of things, around about $1,000 a year would be to increase that grading to fortnightly. So it's pretty low cost. That may not last in the future, of course. We know metal supplies are getting harder. There's more constraints on getting metal out of the rivers, particularly with the ECAN consents. And also we're about to be tendering for a new contract next year. Grading costs may increase, we don't know.
Yes, Councillor Piddington.
Andrew, but there's no residents. That road's only used as a shortcut, is that correct?
It's used, but it's used by heavy vehicles a lot. I believe there is some quarrying and particularly farming activities up there that heavy vehicles drive down. So the fact that we've got here 13% heavy vehicles recorded on that road indicates there is quite a bit of activity up the top end.
Councillor Wills.
Through you, Madam Chair. I have a number of questions here. Having read the presentation over the weekend, a couple of things that I have concerns around is if we go down and looking at sealing that particular road, there's also concern about the amount of bitumen supplies that's currently available throughout the district, and with the local government and central government, shovel-ready projects, and obviously roading is going to become one of the key things in those areas. Is this going to be able to fit within the timeframes and also within the budgets, with the amount of bitumen and everything else that's really available in the central South Island at the moment? And the other thing that I had a question around is that a wee bit of tags and a wee bit to the question that Stu's asked, Councillor Piddington, sorry, that what are our current roading projects? I mean, saying, like, here are two projects that just sort of come out of the blue. I would really like to see a list of what the roading projects are, the priorities, and get an understanding why and how we got those priorities around getting the different ones up at level. Because I note on the report that, we talk about seal extensions in extraordinary circumstances. I don't know whether one accident by driver fault is to justify extraordinary circumstances for the qualification of putting this onto the new budget. And reading into the budget, I see there that it says that we had $100,000 unallocated funding that's had been approved in the 19-20 annual plan budget. And again, I'm just really worried that here we are, some more examples of the spow wave effect, that money isn't being spent because projects aren't being completed, and we're trying to find that money to flow over into other projects, which, as I just spoke about the bitumen, that we may not have sufficient supplies to be able to do the work that we want to complete this year. So sorry, I'll just throw that out for anyone that can answer those three questions.
Can I just clarify that the $100,000 is I put as unallocated. Basically, the council approved the seal extension of Thompson's Road this year. That job has been complete, and there was only $200,000 effectively, or $230,000. So there's $100,000 remaining in the budget. Council approved seal extensions, so we don't rush out and find another project that we'll spend that on. So it is sitting there unallocated as such. It can be carried forward into the next financial year, or can be just left as basically savings, cost savings.
Okay.
And in regards to the priority of the roads, I see Eric, I see you got your hand up.
Sorry, what was the second question there, Councillor Wills?
Just around the priority of our roads,
yeah.
And especially our rural ones.
Yeah. The priority that we have first and foremost is maintaining the existing roading network that we've got. We have a lot of roads that are reaching the end of their useful life, particularly with the increased heavy vehicles that are driving on them. So, we have rehabilitation, basically pavement renewals is the #1 priority. We've got Mill Road, Winchester Henrock Road, Winchester Geraldine, Bridge 72. These are all roads that are high use and are actually getting towards the end of their design life. So cost approaching us in that area.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to move to Mayor Bowen.
Yeah, well, thank you. Look, I think we've got to be careful that we don't seal roads just to protect stupid. Have we looked at other road safety measures in and around this? Is there, signage, speed limit signage and that sort of stuff? So that's what sort of one point. But also we've got these two seal extensions, and to me, it's sort of, and I'm not sure what the demand has been over the longer term. But we perhaps don't have the right strategic approach. And, potentially this is an LTP issue in and around seal extension. Do we need to increase those budgets moving forward? Because, there's, a total of $1.5 million worth of work, and we've got seal extension budget, of $330 a year. So just doesn't quite cut it. So I think we need to probably decide whether we do want to put more money into these sort of things. And also just with this current one, I'm just conscious, have we done any work around what is the lifetime of the quarry? I don't want to be building a road for a quarry that maybe only has a 2-year life, for example. So have we done analysis around that?
Okay, I'm going to move to Eric and then to Councillor Burt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in answer the prioritization, looking at the projects, the capital works altogether, what we're endeavoring to do through the annual plan process is to ensure that all of those projects are considered as a whole. So that way all of council, all of yourselves will be able to look at all the projects that are being proposed. The recommendation today for both of these reports is only to put these into that bigger picture so that you can be further considered if you want to carry them forward. It's always a tricky thing to consider steel extensions. A couple of things, NZTA rarely funds their FAR contribution to this. So there is that aspect as well. Steel extensions are normally funded by local government wholly. So that's also a consideration in your own thinking of how you want to proceed with this. There's also a lot of pressure, as I think the councillors have already indicated, from residents about steel extensions across the district. So being really careful about how we approach this is always appropriate. The key thing today was to get a good understanding about how we want to proceed with steel extensions, especially with these two that have come on under the reports, but just to look at them to move forward in the annual plan process, where we could have a bigger understanding of everything we're looking to do across the district.
Thank you. Councillor Burt.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So yeah, I think it seems to be that we've kicked off into a business as usual, and as the comments have all come to the fore this morning, the key is that we need to probably take stock and think of the bigger picture, as you've just said, Eric. Certainly no FAR funding for this whatsoever. NZTA will be looking at how they restructure that going forward with central government, because it's going to be a key area for getting money out into the economy. This is something we probably need to just sit back and just say, let's get a bigger plan together in this new environment going forward on spending. We need to look at how that's going to happen, and to kick forward now and do this. It just seems a wee bit like it was we're going back into a normal period when we all know that's not the case. In terms of Councillor Will's question around bitumen, it's not bitumen. And in this case, it would just be a chip seal, which is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, but it'll be a chip seal. Plenty of that round. There's not going to be no shortage of tar seal or bitumen, or if you want to call it that, or chip seal going forward. That's probably not going to be the issue. The issue is how it's going to be done, where it's going to be spent, who's funding it. So I think it's on this one, I think it's a tie-ho. Come back to us and say, what is our strategic plan going forward on these type of sealing projects?
Thank you, Councillor Burt. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you. Look, it's an interesting one, the sealing one always, and as was pointed out by somebody earlier on, there's only 330,000 in that budget anyway, and it's always been very difficult to access in recent times, because it was almost needed a 50-50 subsidy to access it, other than the recent Temuka one. But I certainly come to, as a person who's got vested interest in rural roads, I suspect, I'm not sure that ramping these ones up just now is at all fair. I take the point that this is just moving it forward for further consideration, but I think, as the Mayor pointed out, we have a further conversation, or a more important conversation, about what we are prepared to put into spending for new seal in the future, and then have the conversation about where we'll spend it afterwards. It's quite simply the budgets that we've got now won't do it, of course. We all know that. So the conversation really is, how serious are we about putting funding into new steel extensions into the future? It's something that previous councils have found difficult to fund, and if we can find ourselves in a position that we are able to fund extra seal extension in the future in the appropriate areas, once I guess areas are compared with each other and priorities are compared with each other. And let us not just do things in a knee-jerk reaction. We need to compare. It's not the complaints we've had most recently. It's roads that have had long history of issues and complaint. So the most recent one is wonderfully fresh in our minds. I'm sure there's many, many more that have got the same pressures on them as this one particularly, and we're talking about Spur Road now. So I would err on the side of just going quiet and looking at the resealing process globally and work out where our intentions are. What are our intentions? Are we now going to ramp up new sealing within Timaru District? And that's a conversation we really, really need to have. And if we are doing that, that will be fine. Then we look at the priorities.
Thank you, Councillor Lyon. Councillor Booth.
It's been done via contributions by the people who've done the developments, or because it appears it's probably being driven by urban people moving out to the lifestyle blocks. And part of that is that some of them probably contribute to the sealing process. And if there is, I'm just wondering if there's any, if the people are waiting to do subdivisions on the rest of that Spur Road, and that's perhaps what's driving this. So yeah, I guess that so far I would assume that there's been contributions given by people who have applied to cut land up, and that probably should continue to be the case, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Bruce. Any more further discussions? Okay, so there are Councillor Piddington.
I just wanted to know, like, these pop out of the blue. Andrew, do you actually have a priority list anywhere, or is that a bit ignorant of me? Like, I would have thought there'd be some sort of list somewhere in history that said this should be next.
Yeah, we used to keep a list of seal extensions, and council actually has a seal extension policy in place. It was adopted many years ago, probably about 12, 13 years ago, which has a formula attached to it. It basically says you take the traffic volume, the number of houses affected, number of heavy vehicles, I think it is, and it comes out with a priority effectively from that. It's predominantly driven by the traffic volume. So yeah, I know that Orari Back Road, which we're going to discuss next, is the top of the list and has been for a long time, given the numbers of traffic that are on it. It's our highest trafficked unsealed road in the district. The list was prepared years ago on the basis when council was spending around about $1.2 million per annum on seal extensions. They did that for about 5 years. So there was a significant amount of sealing went on at that time. We sort of addressed all the top priority ones, and then the list ceased after that, effectively.
Thank you, Andrew. So coming back to the recommendation, do we have a feel that this report should, for the steel extension of Spur Road, be forwarded to the annual plan for further discussion? Do I have a mover for that recommendation? No. Okay. I'm not sure what I do next. Yemi Bowen.
Oh, look, Councillor Parker, Madam Chair, look, I think we just, hold this off until we can look at, more strategic. I think those are some of the reviews that have come forward, and we look at seal extension policy, overall. So, my thoughts is that we just park this one for now and come back to it. But as the points have been raised, there's a lot of pressure on this annual plan from all directions. So it won't hurt to leave it until we have a real strategic approach to this.
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. So closing off this report for 7.1, we will leave as is, and we will look forward to further discussion in council regarding the ceiling budgets and work going forward. Okay, moving on to our next report, which is 7.2, the Orari Back Road Seal Extension. So this report is to consider the unsealed sections of Orari Back Road, which is 4.6 kilometres, which is in 2 sections. This road is classified as a primary collector under the One Network road classification. It's a key freight route. It's got a high proportion of heavy vehicles and it has fortnightly grading. I'll invite Andrew Dixon to speak to the report, followed by Councillor Oliver.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this one here, Orari Back Road, I would have, as I said before, is probably one of the higher priority ones for seal extension. It's used extensively. The traffic volumes are around about 130 vehicles a day on it, of which 28% of those are heavy vehicles. It is used a lot as a shortcut, basically heading out to Route 72 and bypassing the Geraldine Township with used the heavy vehicles. So there has been a number of seal extensions done along this road progressively over the years, using with residents basically contributing 50% of the cost. So under our seal extension policy, that means that the council will fund the other 50%. That has happened, but there's still quite a substantial amount that is unsealed. Any questions?
Councillor Oliver.
Look, yes, thank you very much, Andrew, for the report. Look, I've spoken with local transport contractor Peter Hobbs, who runs the local transport down at Orari. Look, the thing is with this bit of road is, as far as Peter's concerned, is that it is an opportunity to make it as a heavy vehicle bypass of the Geraldine Township. It could become route specific, which would direct the heavy traffic along that bit of road and away from the Geraldine Township. We know we currently had quite big issues with obviously the lower end of Talbot Street and now the CBD, with the truck movement softening the road in the CBD, which now was due to be repaved, had new pavement this year. I believe I've had a discussion with Andrew and said that it has to be a bit more further investigation into that because the road's softening underneath. He says that it's obviously a shorter route, so it would be good for transport companies would use it because it's about 2 kilometres shorter to get to Orari via that back road than what it is to go down to the Geraldine Township and turn up Orari through Mackenzie Street and up to Orari Station Road, which would be a bit of a saving of about $6 a trip for transport companies. So, you know, if you're making 30 odd trips a month, you know, you're saving quite a bit of money. So it would be highly used. I don't think just sealing it, we'd think that the trucks would still go down to town. The good thing about it is if it was to become sealed, the roads that run off this piece of road have all been recently upgraded. Orari Station Road up to Coach Road has been upgraded and widened, and also Coach Road, pretty much the whole length has been widened, and obviously with the new roundabout going in on Geraldine Winchester Highway, it makes this whole network quite robust surface-wise for the future. So, you know, although that would send more traffic along those roads, we wouldn't need to be upgrading. Well, I'd like to think we wouldn't need to be upgrading them because they've just been recently done. So there's definitely quite big advantages going forward. Obviously, at the moment, the biggest problem is that sometimes the road's almost unusable, although it is graded 2 weeks fortnightly now, which is great. But after rain, it does become a bit precarious. And as Andrew said recently, there is quite a huge stretch of road there that's tar sealed. So as the traffic's coming off those 2 bits of tar sealed road at 100 k's, it does become a bit dicey, obviously, when you hit the shingle. So pretty much in a nutshell, we think there's a huge amount of advantage to have this road sealed for the future, and it would obviously future-proof the main CBD and Lower Talbot Street, or the Talbot Street as well, from heavy traffic, and would future-proof those 2 new bits of road going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. I'll move to Councillor Wills and Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you. Just again, I compare it to the last report. Again, I like to sit back, wait and see we've got the overall picture, tie-ho on this a wee bit, because again, it's going to be the big picture thing. Once we start investing in some infrastructure, how are we going to spend it, where we're going to spend it. So once again, I think let's slow down, wait till we get an overall report and put it back into the annual plan for a bit of a discussion, and let's have a good debate about it then, because there may be other priority roads that we're not aware of because we haven't seen a list. So I'll be really comfortable just to slow down, pull the handbrake on this as well, and come back as another report. Thank you.
Councillor Wills. Councillor O'Reilly.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm the question I ask, and you might be able to answer me, Councillor Oliver. If that becomes a well-used route, if it is tar sealed, would you foresee the traffic, all of the heavy traffic, actually using that as a route going onto Coach Road with that roundabout going in? Would that drive more of the vehicles down that route to get them right out of Geraldine Township? Could you foresee that? Would that be a...
Yeah, thanks, Councillor O'Reilly. You like talking with Peter yesterday. Obviously, it's probably a little bit of a longer route through to the Geraldine once you use the highway, but it's probably quicker, in a matter of fact. So as far as time goes, it's obviously a better route to take. Obviously, the issues is getting through town off Cox Street and those sorts of areas, getting big trucks around. I know that Peter did say that one of his drivers ran over a police car, of all things, in the main street there 2 years ago. So obviously there's all those sorts of things as well going forward. So look, I think that, like I said, Peter believes that, and he's right up with the Road Transport Association, says that could become a route specific. Council could make that a route specific route. So that would take the heavy vehicles out of the main street of Geraldine, which would obviously future-proof the surface in Geraldine and Lower Talbot Street.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's one of those roads that I think, I've used it myself a few times. I think it probably needs to be done. When it gets done is the other question, maybe going into the annual plan. But if it has been on the top of the list of roads that to be upgraded, I think we need to look at it sooner than later. That's really all I'd say.
Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. Mayor Bowen.
Thank you. Look, I don't take away from my comments from before, but however, I do see this as a priority. Taking into Councillor Wills' point, it would be very good to see that list. But on this particular one, I would support it going through for consideration. We still do have unallocated funds, and then 330 in the next annual plan. I'm not sure really whether, in my mind, seal extension overall, if we're considering that within an annual plan process, I think that's probably less likely and more so a longer term planning priority. So if you look at our current ceiling budget, 100 unallocated, 330 for the next financial year, going into a new LTP, it won't be until another year that we would be considering really increased spend. So I'm happy for this one in some shape or form to move forward to the annual plan considerations. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. Jan, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that this is a very good, solid project that has obvious priority. I'd add to Councillor Oliver's comments that it would allow the bypassing of the high school, which already has a great deal of traffic outside it, and has presented some real safety issues. One other thing to take into account is that probably the use of the intersection with Highway 79 would be an issue that would have to be thought about, because you would have heavy traffic pulling out of there at a far greater rate. Just around the issue of how things are prioritised, I completely agree. I think that a strategic overview is far better than tackling projects ad hoc. But I would also question on top of that, are the indicators fit for purpose, Andrew? Because as you said, they were created 12, maybe 13 years ago. And is the matrix right? Are projects being selected in an appropriate way? So a couple of issues there, just relating to the specific project and to the higher order process on this.
Thank you, Jan. Councillor Lyon, then Councillor Booth.
Thank you. As Mayor Nigel correctly points out, there's only 440,000 available in the next financial. So, and this is what 1.2 or 1.4 or whatever. So really, there's an opportunity to get some background on the suggestions being made by Councillor Oliver and others about this road being some kind of pressure relief for within the Geraldine urban area. So some background on that and the reality of how that could be used and will it be used? And of course, if it's put in for that reason, how on earth do you make people use it for that purpose? So there's probably a wee bit of work to be done, or a wee bit of knowledge to come towards the table about the realities of what can be done to justify that spend, and then justify the reasoning for bypassing the town, and whether that's seen as doable. And if that's the case, naturally it'll take its chances. But I'm happy for it to go forward to the annual plan, but realising we ain't got the dough there to do the job.
Thank you, Councillor Lyon. Councillor Booth.
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking at the long-term plan, and we've got $500,000 in there for resurfacing every year per annum. Perhaps obviously, if it looks like it's 2 stages, do we say put something in for say half it for next year, and then the remainder of it gets done in 2 years' time from there, and it's put into our budget, and that's what we've got to spend, and that's what we spend. I mean, it's about priorities, and just actually, it's just about identifying who's next to be sealed, and that's put into the budget, and that's done. End of conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. So I think we've had a good discussion, unless there's any other councillors that wish to say anything. Sorry, yeah, Councillor Lyon.
Just wish to say that the 330 that's put in each year has been had an ability for some of that, or all of it, to be used in areas where residents and ratepayers chose to put up 50%, on a project. So you'd have to consider whether you want to leave some amount there for potential for that activity in the future, or whether you think that is something that is not important anymore. Or Andrew might know that there's nothing in the wings, but as we're learning today, things just keep coming out of the blue anyway as we go along. So it's always hard to read, isn't it?
Thank you, Councillor Lyon. Okay, so we've had a good discussion. It seems pretty clear that we are looking at reviewing our priority lists and how we score these roads in their prioritisation. The recommendation that we have in front of us is for this report to be forwarded to the annual plan for further consideration, which would bulk it up a little bit with some further investigations. From our discussions, I have a notion that Mayor Byron, you're happy to move that recommendation, and Councillor Lyon, were you happy to second that?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, very good. All right, moving on to our last report for infrastructure this morning, 7.3.
Sorry, Councillor Park, you've just got the CE wanting to speak.
Oh, sorry.
That's quite all right. Councillor Parker, just if we can cycle back to the one on Spur Road, I wonder, just that there's now a slight divergence, if we couldn't pass, I don't know if a resolution was passed that the committee did consider the Spur Road one and essentially agreed that it would not go into the annual plan, but would be considered once a strategic approach to seal extensions had been considered and its priority put into that. So I could flip through some wording to yourself and Councillor Doyle right now so that that resolution can be put and voted on, because I don't recall that just on that Spur Road one if there was an actual resolution passed. I'm not sure.
No, the report was pretty much just part, and I thought Spur Road would come again when we got the prioritisation list through.
So it might be just helpful for when we come back later then if we just note that the report is parked and Spur Road will come back once a priority list has been agreed.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone would move and second that, then we've got something that we can be clear about so that later on there's not some uncertainty because there's a slight divergence between the two here.
Sure, thank you. I'm happy to move that if there's a seconder. Councillor O'Reilly, thank you. All in favour? Aye. Against? Perfect, move. Thank you, Bede. Okay, moving on to 7.3. So this is a draft government policy statement on land transport. So thank you to Eric and Andrew and your team for this report. It's comprehensive. It's regarding the final government policy statement on the land transport 2021-22 to 2030-31. Andrew, would you like to speak to this report, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the government GPS, it basically dictates the funding streams for transport projects for a 3-year period. This particular one is for the period 2021-22 through to, or 3 years from there. So it basically is the income for the funds for this comes from the fuel excise tax on petrol and also the road user charges from diesel, and the other is the motor registration. So all that is put into a big bucket, and this government policy statement sort of determines, I guess, the areas in which that money will be spent and what activities. So it allocates, I guess, individual buckets to the various activities. You could have road maintenance, police enforcement, walking, cycling, public transport. So there's all those particular activities. This is the way the government drives the direction of transport in New Zealand. Now, this policy statement, of course, was released pre-COVID-19. So there are definitely some issues and some questions around how the government is going to deal with that. Certainly the income over this last month has dropped significantly. Now, that may bounce back and may be just a blip in the overall scheme of things, but it's something that probably needs to be considered. The policy statement itself, yes, it has some priority areas which I've listed in the report there: road safety, better travel options, freight connections, and climate change. The freight connections one is a new one, and I must say that's great to see that as this Labour government is actually realising the importance of freight. Previously, it was bundled up into an access thing, and freight got missed really a little bit. The climate change, of course, is a new one. It's adding in there, and it is more or less focusing on the mitigation in regard to reduce emissions, but there is a little bit of adaptation included in there, and looking at future transport resilience in particular. So of the key things I think I've noted in the report there, the ones I'd just like to highlight is that road maintenance, unfortunately, is not well funded. The government still is not really giving us a step change, even though we've got a very much an ageing asset. And this is across the country. This is not just Timaru district, and state highways as well. So the increase in local road maintenance is effectively just an inflation adjustment. There's not much there. The second one that I think is very disappointing is that with the road safety, we're looking at Road to Zero. Definitely looking for a big improvement in road safety, reducing crashes, reducing the harm on our roads, and yet the enforcement side of things with the police funding has remained exactly the same, again with just an inflation adjustment. Bit disappointing really. Yeah, infrastructure wise it's had a big step change. I think the enforcement side should also have that step change. The other thing is government is putting a lot of money into public transport, but that is mainly focusing on the metro areas, and certainly a significant amount of funding will be going to Auckland and Wellington, not so much Christchurch. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the floor? Councillor Burt.
Yeah, it's really the new direction, and we don't know exactly how much that's going to be affected by the change to our environment, but certainly it's going to look like central government will have to revisit that whole structure again going forward. But I'm happy to move that as read.
Thank you, Councillor Burt. Councillor Booth.
Okay, yeah, Andrew, just in regards to some of your comments, you're saying that obviously with the advent of heavier vehicles on the road, it's harder on all our infrastructure, and you're saying the government hasn't allowed extra money for us to cover that extra maintenance due to the increased weights. Would that be true?
That's correct, Councillor Booth. Yeah, I think that the government is signalling that rail will save us in that respect, and that they are aiming to have a lot more freight carried by rail rather than road, and therefore we won't need the extra funding as the road won't be deteriorating as quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I've got a mover for the report, Councillor Burt. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gilchrist. All in favour? Aye. Move. Passed. Okay, we had no matters of urgent business or minor nature. Therefore, I'll close infrastructure meeting at oh, hang on, 10:31. Thank you.